The Advantage: Why Organizational Health Trumps Everything Else in Business by Patrick Lencioni. Patrick Lencioni doesn't mince words in The Advantage. He declares that organizational health isn't just another buzzword or feel-good concept. It's the most significant competitive edge any company can have. In a world obsessed with strategies, financial metrics, and technological innovation, Lencioni shifts your focus to something far more foundational: the internal culture, clarity, and cohesion of your organization. He argues that the healthiest companies consistently outperform their smarter, more technologically advanced competitors because they eliminate confusion, foster trust, and align every team member around a clear, shared purpose. Organizational health isn't about surface-level perks or charismatic leadership. It's about building an environment where smart people can thrive, collaborate, and contribute to meaningful goals. Lencioni breaks down the concept into actionable steps, showing you how to reduce politics, clarify purpose, and ensure every employee feels genuinely connected to the organization's mission. This book isn't a technical manual filled with jargon. It's a blueprint for transforming your team into a cohesive, high-performing unit. Lencioni draws on real-world case studies, personal experiences, and timeless leadership principles to illustrate how small but intentional changes can lead to massive results. If you're leading a team, managing a department, or shaping an organization at any level, you can't afford to overlook the principles outlined here. Organizational health isn't a nice-to-have. It's the foundation upon which every success is built. Lesson 1. Build a cohesive leadership team. At the top of every healthy organization lies a leadership team that operates with trust, alignment, and clarity. Lencioni makes it clear: if the leaders of an organization are dysfunctional, the ripple effects will undermine every layer beneath them. Trust isn't built through surface-level team-building exercises or off-site retreats filled with icebreaker games. It's forged through vulnerability, honesty, and a willingness to admit mistakes. Leaders must create an environment where disagreements are welcomed, constructive debate is encouraged, and everyone feels safe challenging assumptions. Without vulnerability-based trust, teams fall into a dangerous cycle of artificial harmony. People nod politely in meetings but voice their real opinions in hushed conversations afterward. Decisions are made in silos, conflicts fester, and alignment becomes impossible. Lencioni recounts a real-life example from a technology firm whose executive team was locked in this exact pattern. The team avoided hard conversations, nodded in agreement during meetings, and then undermined decisions in private. The result? Mistrust trickled down to every department, and productivity plummeted. Departments became territorial, information was withheld, and employees mimicked the dysfunction they saw at the top. The leadership team set the tone for the entire company, and the message was clear: self-preservation matters more than collective success. Contrast this with Southwest Airlines, where leadership dynamics tell a very different story. The airline became an industry leader not because of groundbreaking technology or financial muscle, but because its leadership team prioritized trust and open communication. They approached disagreements head-on, embraced constructive conflict, and made decisions collectively, even when it required uncomfortable discussions. This created a cascading culture of trust, where employees at every level felt empowered to speak up, challenge ideas, and act in the company's best interest without fear of retribution. Trust at the top isn't just a feel-good value. It's the foundation of every strategic success and operational efficiency. If leaders refuse to model vulnerability and transparency, they send an unspoken message that these behaviors are liabilities rather than strengths. You see this principle play out in other arenas as well. In Jim Collins' Good to Great, Collins emphasizes how Level 5 leaders, those who combine humility with fierce resolve, drive their companies to extraordinary success. These leaders don't avoid hard conversations, nor do they hoard credit. They build teams where trust isn't an afterthought, it's the central pillar. Think about NASA's Apollo 13 mission, a masterclass in cohesive leadership under extraordinary pressure. When a catastrophic failure threatened the crew's survival, the leadership team didn't retreat into blame or panic. Instead, they trusted their experts, facilitated open communication, and encouraged collaborative problem-solving. The result wasn't just a successful rescue, it was an enduring lesson in leadership cohesion under the most extreme conditions. But trust alone isn't enough. Cohesion also requires alignment around purpose, priorities, and shared goals. Lencioni stresses that a leadership team must agree on what success looks like and how to measure it. Without alignment, even the most well-intentioned leaders will pull in different directions. Imagine a rowing team where each rower follows their rhythm instead of the coxswain's commands. The result isn't progress, it's chaos. Alignment ensures that every leader, every department, and every employee moves in sync, guided by the same mission and motivated by shared outcomes. This requires clarity, not vague aspirations, but specific, actionable goals that every team member understands and supports. At its core, building a cohesive leadership team means creating an environment where accountability isn't optional, it's expected. Leaders must hold themselves and each other responsible for commitments, behaviors, and results. Lencioni warns against one of the most common pitfalls: leaders who hold their subordinates accountable but shy away from holding their peers accountable. This double standard erodes trust and creates resentment. Healthy teams don't rely on hierarchical authority for accountability. They rely on mutual respect and shared ownership. When a team member falls short, a cohesive team addresses the issue directly, constructively, and without unnecessary drama. You, as a leader, have to ask yourself some hard questions. Do you encourage honest conversations, or do you avoid uncomfortable truths to maintain superficial harmony? Do your colleagues trust each other enough to share doubts and concerns without fear of repercussions? Are your team members aligned on the organization's core goals and priorities, or do they seem to operate in their silos with conflicting agendas? These questions aren't academic. They're diagnostic tools for identifying cracks in your team's foundation. Building a cohesive leadership team isn't an abstract concept. It's a daily commitment to trust, accountability, and shared goals. It's about modeling vulnerability, fostering clarity, and holding yourself and your peers accountable with integrity. Every meeting, every interaction, and every decision is an opportunity to reinforce these principles or undermine them. If you're serious about building a cohesive leadership team, you can't afford to treat it as a one-time initiative. It's not a box to check. It's an ongoing practice that requires relentless attention and intention. The health of your leadership team determines the health of your entire organization. It's not someone else's responsibility. It's yours. The team at the top sets the tone, and that tone reverberates throughout every level of your company. Build trust, align your goals, and lead with courage. Everything else depends on it. Lesson 2. Create clarity. Once a leadership team is cohesive, it must create absolute clarity about the organization's purpose, values, and priorities. Ambiguity is the enemy of progress, and vague mission statements or contradictory goals create confusion that stalls momentum. Lencioni emphasizes that clarity isn't a luxury, it's a requirement for alignment, focus, and sustained success. Without it, even the most talented teams will flounder, pulled in conflicting directions by unclear expectations or shifting priorities. Lencioni identifies 6 critical questions every leadership team must answer. Why do we exist? How do we behave? What do we do? How will we succeed? What's most important right now? And who must do what? These aren't theoretical exercises. They are the foundation of every decision, strategy, and initiative within the company. Every leader must not only know the answers, but also communicate them consistently and relentlessly to the rest of the organization. When clarity breaks down at the top, it breeds confusion, misalignment, and wasted effort at every level below. Lencioni shares an example of a non-profit organization with an inspiring mission, but no clarity around roles and responsibilities. Board members and executives stepped on each other's toes. Critical projects stalled, and frustration grew. The organization's mission statement sounded impressive on paper, but in practice, no one could articulate how their daily tasks connected to that overarching purpose. Meetings became battlegrounds for competing agendas, and energy was drained by internal confusion instead of being directed toward external impact. It wasn't until the leadership team sat down and wrestled with the 6 critical questions, answering them honestly and explicitly, that the fog of ambiguity lifted. They clarified the roles of the board versus the executive team, prioritized their most important goals, and established clear responsibilities for execution. Operations became streamlined, and every team member understood their role in advancing the mission. It was not a change in talent or resources that unlocked their potential. It was clarity. Compare this to Apple during Steve Jobs' leadership, where clarity around purpose and priorities drove relentless focus and world-changing innovation. Jobs didn't just articulate a mission statement, he lived it, repeated it, and ensured every team member understood it at their core. Apple's purpose wasn't just to make computers. It was to challenge the status quo and create tools that empower creativity and innovation. Every product, every meeting, and every decision was filtered through that lens. When Apple decided to cut dozens of product lines and focus on a handful of core innovations, it wasn't a random act. It was clarity in action. Jobs understood that trying to do everything meant doing nothing well. He aligned his team on the why behind their work, and the results spoke for themselves. But clarity isn't just for tech giants or non-profits. It's just as essential for small businesses, community organizations, and individual teams. Imagine a sports team where each player has a different interpretation of the game plan. The quarterback thinks the team is playing aggressively, the defense thinks they're playing conservatively, and the coach can't decide on the primary objective for the season. The result is chaos. Success in sports, like success in business, depends on every team member understanding the goal, their role in achieving it, and the strategy for execution. The same principle applies in your organization. If your team doesn't know what the priority is this month, this quarter, or this year, they'll default to individual interpretations, creating silos and misalignment. Clarity also extends beyond high-level strategy. It must permeate daily operations. Every meeting, every project kickoff, and every performance review is an opportunity to reinforce clarity. Leaders must over-communicate the answers to the 6 questions because clarity fades over time. Human nature drifts toward ambiguity, and organizational inertia can pull teams back into old habits. Leaders must act as stewards of clarity, constantly pulling their teams back to alignment when distractions and competing priorities emerge. Lencioni warns that where clarity is absent, politics and bureaucracy take its place. When people don't know how decisions are made, what success looks like, or who's responsible for what, they start protecting their turf, hoarding information, and advancing personal agendas. These behaviors aren't driven by malice. They're the natural response to uncertainty. As a leader, your responsibility is to eliminate that uncertainty wherever it exists. Your team should know exactly how their work contributes to the organization's purpose and goals. They should know who makes final decisions, what the priorities are, and how their success will be measured. Take inspiration from Start With Why by Simon Sinek, where he emphasizes that great leaders and great organizations begin with a clear sense of purpose. Companies like Apple, Southwest Airlines, and Patagonia succeeded not just because of great products or brilliant strategies, but because they communicated their why with relentless clarity. Employees, customers, and stakeholders didn't just understand the purpose, they believed in it. As a leader, you must ask yourself, does every person on your team understand the organization's core purpose? Can they articulate it in their own words? Do they know how their specific role connects to that purpose? Are the current priorities crystal clear to everyone? If you hesitate to answer any of these questions, you have work to do. Clarity isn't a one-time initiative. It's an ongoing responsibility. It requires constant reinforcement, consistent communication, and the courage to simplify when complexity threatens to cloud the message. Your takeaway is this: clarity isn't optional, it's foundational. Without it, even the most talented teams and the most brilliant strategies will fail. Your job as a leader is to eliminate ambiguity, Align your team on purpose and priorities, and ensure every person knows their role in achieving success. Don't assume clarity exists. Verify it, reinforce it, and protect it. When you create clarity, you give your team a shared focus, a common language, and the confidence to move forward together. Without it, you leave them wandering in the fog of uncertainty. Make clarity your obsession, and the results will follow. Lesson 3. Over-communicate clarity. Creating clarity isn't enough. It must be communicated consistently, redundantly, and relentlessly. Leaders often make the mistake of assuming that because they've said something once, everyone has heard, understood, and internalized it. Lencioni shatters this illusion with a hard truth. Clarity fades unless it is reinforced repeatedly. Human beings are bombarded with distractions, shifting priorities, and competing demands on their attention. One announcement, one email, or one meeting simply isn't enough to make a message stick. People need to hear key messages repeatedly, in different contexts and through different mediums, before they fully sink in. Lencioni recounts a case study from a Fortune 500 company where leaders rolled out a bold new strategic vision. It was unveiled with great fanfare at a company-wide meeting, complete with polished slide decks and motivational speeches. But then, nothing. The vision wasn't reinforced in follow-up meetings, wasn't embedded into team objectives, and wasn't discussed in one-on-one conversations between managers and employees. Within weeks, the initial energy dissipated, confusion set in, and departments began to drift back into their silos. Projects lost alignment, resources were misallocated, and the strategic initiative quietly crumbled. Contrast this with organizations like Ritz-Carlton, where over-communication of core values is a non-negotiable part of their culture. Every employee, from housekeeping staff to executives, begins their day with a daily lineup meeting. During these gatherings, team members review Ritz-Carlton's core principles, discuss customer service stories that embody those values, and align on the day's priorities. These values aren't confined to posters on a wall or onboarding manuals. They are brought to life every single day through repetition and reinforcement. Over-communication at Ritz-Carlton isn't about empty slogans or motivational sound bites. It's about weaving clarity into the very fabric of the organization. Employees aren't just expected to know the values, they're expected to embody them. As a result, Ritz-Carlton has become synonymous with excellence in hospitality. Not because of one grand vision statement, but because of 1,000 small reinforcements of that vision every single day. The same principle holds true in high-stakes scenarios like military operations. In the Navy SEALs, mission objectives aren't just communicated once. They are briefed, debriefed, and repeated multiple times to ensure every team member understands not only their role, but the broader mission. Lives depend on clarity, and the cost of ambiguity is far too high. The lesson is simple but profound. Repetition doesn't dull a message. It sharpens it. As a leader, you're not just responsible for setting the vision, you're responsible for making sure it's understood, internalized, and acted upon. But over-communicating clarity isn't about mindless repetition. It's about intentional reinforcement. It's about using every opportunity to align your team. Whether it's an all-hands meeting, a one-on-one conversation, an email update, or an informal chat in the hallway. Every touch point is a chance to remind your team of the why behind their work, the what they need to focus on, and the how they can contribute to success. Leaders must become translators, constantly articulating big-picture goals in a way that makes sense to every individual on the team. You must bridge the gap between vision and execution, ensuring no one feels disconnected from the organization's purpose. Consider how Jeff Bezos approached communication at Amazon. Bezos was famously relentless about reinforcing Amazon's commitment to being Earth's most customer-centric company. This wasn't just a tagline, it was a mantra repeated in shareholder letters, executive meetings, team huddles, and employee training programs. Every major decision was measured against this clarity of purpose. When teams proposed new initiatives, they were challenged to demonstrate how those initiatives would serve the customer better. Amazon's explosive growth wasn't accidental. It was the result of a leadership team that didn't just set priorities, but repeated them tirelessly until they became cultural bedrock. Over-communicating clarity also requires consistency. You can't deliver one message in a quarterly town hall and a contradictory one in a follow-up email. Mixed signals breed confusion, erode trust, and lead to disengagement. Your team looks to you for direction, and every inconsistency undermines their confidence in the mission. The most effective leaders align their words with their actions, their strategy with their execution, and their messaging across every platform. In your own organization, this means embedding clarity into every layer of communication. Start meetings with a reminder of the core priorities. End emails with a brief reinforcement of key objectives. Make sure every team member understands not only their tasks, but how those tasks contribute to the larger goals. Don't leave alignment to chance. Verify it. Ask your team to articulate the priorities back to you. Pay attention to their language, their focus, and their execution. If you spot drift, address it immediately, not with frustration, but with renewed clarity. Patrick Lencioni draws parallels to the way effective teachers reinforce lessons in the classroom. A great teacher doesn't assume students understand a concept after hearing it once. They explain it, provide examples, test comprehension, and revisit the concept in different ways over time. Leadership is no different. You're not just delivering information, you're building understanding. And understanding requires repetition. Your takeaway is this: never assume your team knows what's most important. Remind them, consistently and deliberately. Be relentless about communicating the why, the what, and the how. Use meetings, emails, one-on-ones, and informal conversations to drive clarity home. Don't fear repetition. It's your most powerful tool for alignment. Every time you communicate, you have the chance to sharpen focus, eliminate ambiguity, and reignite purpose. Over-communicate clarity, not because your team isn't smart enough to understand the message, but because the world is noisy. Distractions are endless, and clarity fades without reinforcement. Do it until your team rolls their eyes because they've heard it so many times, then say it again. That's how you turn clarity into results. Lesson 4. Reinforce clarity through human systems. Clarity must extend beyond conversations and into the systems and processes that govern an organization. Lencioni insists that every policy, performance review, reward system, and hiring process must align with the organization's core priorities and values. Words alone cannot drive alignment. The structures that guide daily operations must support and reinforce the clarity established by leadership. Too often, organizations undermine their stated goals with systems that incentivize contradictory behavior. For example, a company might claim to value collaboration and teamwork, yet design performance reviews that reward individual achievement at the expense of group success. The result? Employees focus on personal wins instead of collective progress. Lencioni shares the story of a healthcare organization that prioritized patient care in its mission statement, but rewarded doctors based solely on patient volume rather than patient outcomes. This misalignment created rushed consultations, frustrated patients, and a growing disconnect between the organization's stated mission and its actual outcomes. Doctors felt pressured to prioritize speed over care, and patients became little more than numbers in a quota-driven system. Contrast this with companies like Zappos, where human systems are carefully designed to reinforce clarity at every level. Hiring processes focus on cultural fit as much as technical skills, ensuring new employees align with Zappos's commitment to exceptional customer service. Performance reviews emphasize not just meeting sales targets, but also how well employees embody the company's values. Reward systems celebrate those who go above and beyond in delivering outstanding customer experiences, rather than simply focusing on profit-driven metrics. Training programs immerse employees in the company's core principles from day one, ensuring alignment isn't just an expectation, it's a shared reality. Zappos doesn't leave clarity to chance, it builds it into every policy, every performance metric, and every recognition system. The result is an organizational culture where clarity isn't a slogan, it's a lived experience. Lencioni underscores a critical point. When systems are misaligned, they create friction, resentment, and cynicism. Employees notice when reward systems contradict stated values, and they lose faith in leadership when words and actions diverge. In contrast, when systems are aligned with organizational clarity, employees don't need constant oversight. They intuitively know how to act because the structures around them reinforce the right behaviors. For example, Patagonia, the outdoor clothing company, explicitly states that environmental responsibility is at the heart of its mission. This commitment isn't limited to marketing materials. It's embedded in their operational systems. Employees are encouraged to volunteer for environmental causes on company time. The supply chain prioritizes sustainable materials, even at higher costs. Patagonia's incentive structures reward long-term environmental stewardship rather than short-term financial gains. When systems reflect clarity, employees become natural ambassadors of the mission, and alignment happens organically. History offers further examples of the power of aligning systems with clarity. During World War II, the United States government had to mobilize its economy to support the war effort. Factories that once produced cars began building tanks and aircraft. Rationing systems were put in place to ensure essential resources like fuel, rubber, and food were distributed strategically. Propaganda campaigns reinforced the importance of sacrifice and collective effort. Every policy, system, and incentive aligned with the singular goal of winning the war. This systemic clarity allowed the nation to achieve extraordinary outcomes in a remarkably short time. Without alignment across every layer of society, such results would have been impossible. But aligning human systems isn't a one-time task. It's an ongoing discipline. Leaders must routinely audit their organization structures to ensure they still reflect the core mission and values. Priorities evolve, markets shift, and teams change. Systems that worked perfectly last year may no longer serve the organization's goals today. For example, if an organization values innovation but penalizes employees for failed experiments, it sends a mixed message. If an organization claims to prioritize employee well-being but expects round-the-clock availability, it breeds burnout and disengagement. You must be vigilant, identifying misalignments and addressing them before they fester into cultural norms. Lencioni challenges you to ask hard questions. Do your hiring practices prioritize people who align with your mission? Or do they favor candidates who check off technical boxes but lack cultural fit? Do your performance reviews measure not just results, but how those results were achieved? Do your reward systems celebrate the right behaviors, or do they inadvertently incentivize actions that contradict your values? These aren't abstract considerations. They determine whether your organization thrives or fractures. At Netflix, clarity is embedded in their approach to talent management. Their freedom and responsibility culture places an enormous emphasis on hiring self-motivated, high-performing individuals who thrive in an environment of autonomy. Netflix doesn't rely on rigid policies or micromanagement to drive performance. Instead, they align their systems to reward accountability, creativity, and excellence. Employees are given clear expectations, empowered to make decisions, and evaluated based on outcomes rather than adherence to arbitrary rules. The result is an organization where systems reinforce clarity, and employees are deeply connected to the company's goals. In your team, reinforcing clarity through systems means examining every layer of the organization with a critical eye. It means ensuring that the processes for hiring, onboarding, performance evaluation, and compensation are aligned with your core values and priorities. It means designing systems that make it easier, not harder, for employees to do the right thing. Leaders often underestimate how much their systems shape behavior. People respond to the structures they operate within. If those structures reward clarity, accountability, and collaboration, those behaviors will thrive. If they reward ambiguity, self-interest, and short-term thinking, those patterns will dominate. Your takeaway is straightforward. Clarity must live in your systems, not just in your words. Policies, performance reviews, and reward structures aren't administrative details. They are the levers that drive organizational behavior. Audit your systems regularly. Look for misalignments. Address inconsistencies. And ensure every process reinforces your organization's core mission. Don't expect employees to bridge gaps between rhetoric and reality. Eliminate those gaps through intentional design. When systems reflect clarity, alignment becomes effortless, and dysfunction becomes an outlier, not the norm. The best leaders don't rely on charisma or speeches alone. They build clarity into the very foundation of their organizations. Now it's your turn to do the same. Lesson 5. Build a culture of accountability. Accountability is the linchpin of organizational health. Without it, even the most well-intentioned plans crumble under the weight of excuses, missed deadlines, and finger-pointing. Lencioni emphasizes that accountability isn't about micromanagement. It's about creating a culture where commitments are honored. Underperformance is addressed directly and constructively, and trust is preserved through consistent follow-through. Accountability isn't simply about enforcing consequences when something goes wrong. It's about fostering an environment where people hold themselves and one another to high standards. Leaders must understand that accountability isn't a top-down concept. It's a shared responsibility embedded into the organization's DNA. When accountability thrives, performance improves, trust deepens, and teams become more resilient in the face of challenges. Lencioni illustrates the consequences of weak accountability with the story of a retail chain plagued by chronic underperformance. Store managers consistently missed sales targets, but senior leadership avoided addressing the issue directly. Instead of confronting the root causes, poor communication, lack of training, or unclear expectations, they chose to sidestep uncomfortable conversations in favor of maintaining surface-level harmony. Over time, mediocrity became the cultural norm. Store managers operated without urgency. Team members stopped striving for excellence, and the organization slowly drifted into complacency. Without accountability, goals become suggestions, deadlines become loose guidelines, and high performers become disillusioned by the lack of consequences for those who fail to deliver. In stark contrast, Lencioni highlights Pixar Animation Studios as a prime example of a culture deeply rooted in accountability. At Pixar, candid feedback isn't just encouraged, it's expected. Directors, animators, and writers engage in regular brain trust meetings where unfinished work is critiqued openly. The goal isn't to tear each other down, but to ensure the final product meets Pixar's exacting standards of excellence. Feedback sessions are characterized by honesty, humility, and mutual respect. When accountability is practiced in this way, it eliminates ambiguity, prevents resentment from festering, and ensures everyone understands their role in achieving shared goals. This culture of accountability isn't accidental. It's intentionally built and fiercely protected by Pixar's leadership. Accountability also requires clarity. People can't be held accountable if expectations aren't crystal clear. Leaders must communicate what success looks like, what milestones need to be hit, and what consequences exist for falling short. Ambiguity is the enemy of accountability. For example, Amazon's leadership principle of ownership requires employees to act as if they own the company. This principle creates an accountability mindset across all levels of the organization. Employees know they are responsible not only for their tasks, but also for how those tasks fit into larger organizational objectives. This clarity empowers employees to make decisions confidently and eliminates the temptation to shift blame when problems arise. Lencioni draws parallels to historical events to underscore the power of accountability. During NASA's Apollo program, the stakes couldn't have been higher. The world was watching, resources were finite, and failure wasn't an option. Each team member, from engineers to astronauts, was acutely aware of their role and the weight of their responsibilities. The culture at NASA during that era was defined by accountability at every level. Engineers double-checked calculations, mission control meticulously rehearsed protocols, and astronauts trained exhaustively. When the Apollo 13 mission faced a catastrophic failure, accountability became the glue that held the team together. Each person owned their role in solving the problem, and the crew returned home safely. Accountability, in that moment, wasn't about blame. It was about collective responsibility and an unyielding commitment to the mission. But accountability doesn't just live in grand missions or groundbreaking companies. It must exist in your daily interactions as a leader. Lencioni challenges you to examine your own approach to accountability. Do you address missed deadlines or poor performance directly? Or do you avoid confrontation to maintain short-term peace? Do you hold yourself to the same standards you expect from your team? Leaders must model accountability in their actions, decisions, and follow-through. If you promise to deliver something by a specific date, do you keep your word? If you make a mistake, do you own it openly and take steps to correct it? Leaders who fail to model accountability create a culture where excuses thrive and trust erodes. The absence of accountability creates ripples across an organization. High performers begin to question why they are putting in extra effort when others are allowed to coast. Middle performers see no reason to push themselves if underperformance goes unaddressed. Low performers become comfortable in their mediocrity because they know there are no consequences. Over time, dysfunction becomes entrenched, and organizational health deteriorates. In contrast, a culture of accountability doesn't just improve performance, it builds trust. When team members see that leadership follows through on promises, holds everyone to the same standards, and doesn't shy away from hard conversations, they feel safe, motivated, and aligned with the organization's goals. At Salesforce, CEO Mark Benioff has built a culture where accountability and transparency go hand in hand. Performance metrics are shared openly, feedback flows freely, and leaders are held to the same expectations as frontline employees. Salesforce uses systems and regular check-ins to ensure accountability isn't forgotten amid day-to-day pressures. This approach eliminates surprises, keeps everyone focused on their goals, and fosters a sense of collective ownership. Accountability isn't seen as punitive, it's viewed as a tool for growth and alignment. In your organization, building a culture of accountability starts with you. Set clear expectations, follow through on your commitments, address underperformance promptly and constructively, celebrate excellence publicly and address failures privately but firmly. Build systems that reinforce accountability rather than relying solely on personal vigilance. Remember, accountability isn't about blame, it's about ownership. It's about creating an environment where people don't fear being called out for mistakes, but instead feel empowered to own their contributions fully. Your takeaway is clear. Accountability isn't optional, it's essential. It's not something you can delegate or hope will happen naturally. You must intentionally build it, protect it, and model it every day. Create clarity, address missteps promptly, and celebrate those who embody a sense of ownership in their work. Never let fear of discomfort keep you from having hard conversations. They are the cornerstone of growth and alignment. A culture of accountability doesn't just drive results, it creates trust, eliminates excuses, and builds teams that thrive under pressure. If you want to lead a healthy organization, accountability isn't a box to check. It's a commitment to uphold every single day. Conclusion. The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni leaves no room for doubt. Organizational health isn't optional, it's essential. You've learned that a cohesive leadership team forms the bedrock of a healthy organization. Clarity around purpose, values, and priorities eliminates confusion and aligns efforts. Overcommunication ensures these principles become ingrained at every level, and human systems reinforce them through policies, rewards, and performance evaluations. Finally, a culture of accountability ensures that commitments are honored, excellence is pursued, and dysfunction is addressed before it spreads. If you're serious about creating lasting success, you must prioritize organizational health as intentionally as you pursue strategy, innovation, and profit. For further reading, consider Good to Great by Jim Collins, which explores what separates exceptional companies from average ones, or Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek, which delves into the dynamics of trust and leadership. But don't stop at reading. Act. Organizational health isn't built through intention alone. It's built through consistent, deliberate practice. The success of your organization isn't someone else's responsibility. It's yours. Lead with clarity, build trust, and refuse to settle for mediocrity. The end.